We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 110a. And the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halachas with regards to a Kohen who wants to bring his own korban. And the Brisa continues, Vim haya zaken ochola. Let's say the Kohen is old or he's sick. So then nosna lechol Kohen sheyir. So then he gives the korban to any Kohen that he wants to give it to. Va'avodas va'ora la'anshe mishmor. And then it's service. Again, that refers to the meat and the hide of the animal that would belong to the Kohanim who are serving that particular week in the Beis HaMikdash. And so the Gemara clarifies this last line of the Brisa. What's the case over here with this elder and this sick Kohen? What exactly is the situation? If he's able to perform the avoda, he's not so old, he's not so sick that he can't do the avoda. So avodasa va'ora nami tahavididei. So then it's service, meaning the meat and the hide also should all go to him. And if he's not able to do the avoda, so shliach hechi mashvi, how is he able to appoint a shliach if he himself can't do it? He can't appoint a shliach to do it in his stead. And so the Gemara says, Amar Papa says, the case is as follows in the Brisa, sheyachol lasos al yedei hadachak. He could do the avoda, but he could do it only al yedei hadachak. If he was in a forced situation, then he'd be able to do it. And so therefore we apply the following. Avoda dechi avid le al yedei hadachak. Avoda, when it comes to avoda, so if you do that al yedei hadachak, that's still considered an avoda. Umash v'shliach, therefore it's okay to appoint a shliach. However, achila, when it comes to eating the korban, dechi achal al yedei hadachak achila gasahi. If he were to eat from the korban al yedei hadachak, that would be what we call an achila gasa. Achila gasa is not an achila. Achila gasa lav klumhu. Person eats an achila gasa, meaning to say you eat too much food. It's food that you're not really capable of. It's going to be disgusting to the person. That's not considered anything. And therefore, since he can't eat it because it's achila gasa, mishum hachi avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmor. For that reason, it's service, meaning the meat and the hide, that actually goes to the anshe mishmor, goes to the kohanim who are serving that week in the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi explains, Vim haya zaken, if he's old, v'ro'i la'avoda kin mefarsh l'kamon, he is able to do the avoda, as we will explain. Again, the Gemara explains that he could do it al yedei hadachak, ve'ein ro'i la'achila, but he's not able to eat it. So then, nosna l'hakra, if he gives the animal over, that someone else, any kohen that he wants to appoint, can then bring this animal as a korban, l'chol kohen sheyirtza, any kohen that he wants, to hoel dehu chazi la'avoda, since he in theory could do the avoda himself, masi l'shav yishliach, he can appoint a shliach, v'avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmor, but its service, meaning the meat and the hide, that goes to the anshe mishmor. The kevan de lo chazi la'achila, since he's not able to eat it, lo mashvi shliach la'achila, he can't appoint the shliach to eat it. Achila gasa means shenafsho katzaba, means his soul is disgusted by eating it in that fashion. That's achila gasa. That's not considered any achila at all. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Im haya kohen tameh, if the kohen is tameh, the korban sibor, and we're talking about bringing a korban sibor, which is a public korban, nosna lechol mi sheyirtza, he can give it to whomever he wants, va'avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmor, and then the avoda, meaning again the meat, and the ora, the hide, that goes to the anshe mishmor, that goes to the kohanim who are serving that week in the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi explains, Kohen shel hamishmor tameh. We're talking about the Kohen who is also serving that week in the Beis HaMikdash, if he's tameh. V'yesh lo korban sibor lahakriv, and he has a korban sibor, a public korban rather, that he has to bring. So the halach is, nos no lechol Kohen sheyirtza. He can give it to any Kohen he wants. Dehoel dehu yachol lahakrivo, because since he's able to bring that korban, the korban sibor doches hatumah, because the halach is that a korban sibor pushes off tumah, even though he's tameh, it doesn't matter. He can still bring a korban sibor. So since he himself can bring it, shliach nami motzi avid. A shliach also he's able to appoint. Korban sibor Babba tumah. The halach is that a korban sibor can be brought in tumah, ve'inechol b'tumah, but it cannot be eaten in tumah. B'keitzat solin, that we learn keitzat solin in Meseches Psachim. And so therefore again it says if he's a kohen tameh by korban sibor, gives it to whoever he wants. And again the meat and the hide, that goes to the anshe mishmar. And the Gemara clarifies, hey chidami, what exactly is the case? Idiika tahorim. Now, if we're talking about a situation where there are kohanim who are pure, so tameim imatzu avdi, in such a situation, are the kohanim who are tameh, are they allowed to bring the korban? That's not true. V'idaleka tahorim, and if there's no one that's pure, avodas of or la'anshe mishmor, you're going to give the meat and you're going to give the hides to the anshe mishmor. Hatameim, then why would you give it to them? They're tameh. V'lo matzu achli, they're not able to eat, so the whole thing doesn't make sense. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Ema, rather what you should say is as follows, Lebale mumin tahorin shaba oso mishmor. You give the meat and the hide to those kohanim who have blemishes, but they are pure, and they're part of that mishmor. So they, since they're bale mumin, they can't do the avoda, but they are allowed to receive, they're allowed to eat from the korban. And Rashi says, Ida Ika Tahorin Bahu Mishmar, if within that Mishmar, within that watch, there are pure Kohanim, so then of course, again, you're not going to allow the Tmeim be Matzu Avdi. Would the Tmeim be allowed to bring the carbon? V'kev the lo Matzu Avdi, Shliach Hechi Meshavi. So since Tmeim are not allowed to, so how can he make a Shliach? And so finally the Gemara said, Levale Mumin Tahorin, we're talking about distributing the meat to Kohanim with blemishes that are pure, Mischalekes, that's who divides it up. To Kaimal on Ish Cholek, because there's Ish Cholek Va'afilu Balmum, B'kachim Uvemenachos. Even if it's a Balmum, he's allowed to partake from the kachim, from the karbonos, and the carbon minchas. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Im haya kohen gadol onin, if the kohen gadol is an onin, that means that his close relative died that day, knows no l'chol kohen shirtzi. He gives the carbon to any kohen that he wants to. Va'avodas v'ora la'anshe mishmor. And again, it's service, meaning the meat, and the hide, that goes to the anshe mishmor. And Rashi says, Im haya kohen gadol onin, let's say the kohen gadol is an onin, v'yesh lo carbon atzma lahakrav, he has his own carbon to bring, so knows the l'chol kohen sheyirtz, again it says, he can give it to any kohen he wants. The kaven to kohen gadol makrav onin, the reason is that kohen gadol is allowed to bring as an onin. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, lo aviv u'li'imo lo yitamo, u'min ha'mikdash lo yetze, yemes aviv v'imo dehavi onin, means to say, if his father or mother dies, which makes him an onin, afilu hachi, nevertheless, miktushasa lo yetze, we understand, min ha'mikdash lo yetze, he doesn't leave his kedusha. V'lo yechalel k'lomer da'avodaso sheyavod ba'aninos. When it says v'lo yechalel, it means to say that any avoda he does ba'aninos, lo tischal, it's not going to be profaned, it's going to be a good avoda. Ha'achar hedyot shelo yotzachil. Now it's not true. By an achar, let's say it would be somebody who's a hedyot, who's not a kohen gadol. So in that situation, it would be a problem, it would be profaned to such an avoda. But a kohen gadol, it's not a problem for him to bring the carbon. Therefore, he can bring it. He can give it to any kohen he wants. But the Gemara asks, "My kamashmalan, what is Rav Ashi teaching us?" Tanina, we already learned it in a brayso, so this is from the Tosefta. It says, "Kohen gadol makriv onin." A kohen gadol is allowed to bring the carbon when he's an onin. Ve'eno ochel, but he doesn't eat from it. Ve'eno cholek lechol erev. He also doesn't take portions from it to eat in the evening. In any case, you see, he can bring the carbon. So what's the chiddush of Rav Ashi? Of course, he can appoint a shliach. The Gemara says, "Sal kadaytach amina." One might have thought, "Ki chasra achmana led the kohen gadol lekruvehu." The Torah has mercy on the kohen gadol to allow him to bring. Aval shavuye shliach, but that he should appoint a shliach. Lo matzi mashri, maybe he's not able to appoint a shliach, and so Kamash Malon Rav Ashi is teaching us that he can even appoint a shliach. And Rashi explains, Ve'eno cholek lechol erev. Again, it said that the Kohen Gadol doesn't eat and he doesn't take a portion to eat in the evening. Means to say, Keshetistalik aninus. So at that point in time, he's no longer an onen. The aninus laila d'Rabbanan, because being an onen at night, that's only midrabanan. The aninus d'oraisa eino ela yom misa, because the aninus on a d'oraisa level is only on the day of the death. As it's written, V'achrisa kiyomar alma ein marirus ela yom echad. You see that the bitterness is only one day. Nevertheless, even though the aninus is over, he doesn't take a portion in order to eat in the evening. In any case, the Gemara asked, isn't it obvious? And the Gemara said, it's not obvious. You might have thought he can't appoint a shliach. That's what Rav Ashi is teaching us. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Many of the halachas in this Mishnah were discussed before. Hagozelas hager, if somebody steals from a convert, v'nishbalo, and he takes a false oath, he denies it to the convert, v'meis, and then he dies, meaning to say that the convert dies and there are no heirs. So in this situation, he's going to be chayiv the principal and a fifth because he swore falsely. Hareza mishalim karen v'chomish lekohanim, so he pays the principal and the fifth to the kohanim. V'yasham lemizbeach, and he brings the carbon asham, and that goes to the mizbeach. Shenemar, as it says, v'mein lo ish goel, that if the person he stole from does not have any heirs, lahashiv ha'asham elav, he can't return the principal to the person he stole from. Ha'asham hamushav l'Hashem la'kohen, so then it's returned to Hashem, to the kohen. Milvad el ha'kipurim asher yechaper bo Allah, besides for the ram of atonement which he brings for a kapara. And the Mishnah continues, Hayamales hakesef v'esa asham. Let's say he's bringing the money and he's bringing the carbon asham to Yerushalayim. V'meis, and then he dies, meaning the person who's bringing it to give it to the Kohanim, he dies. So the halach is hakesef yinasin levanav. The halach is that the money goes to his children. They are able to inherit the money. It does not go to the Kohanim. V'asham yira ad sheyistoiv, and then the carbon asham, that animal, it should graze until it develops a mum. V'yimachar, and then you sell the animal. V'yiplu damav l'nadav, and then the money you get from the animal, that goes to nadav. It goes to donations of public karbanos that will go on the mizbeach. And the Mishnah continues, Nasan hakesef l'anshei mishmor. Let's say he already gave the money to the Kohanim that are serving in the Beis HaMikdash, and then v'meis, then he died. Ein hayorshin yicholim lahotzi miyadam. Then his heirs are not able to take it away from the Kohanim. Once they receive it, they receive it. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, v'isha asher yitein lakohen lo yeh. It says once it's given to the Kohen, so it's the Kohen's. It's not taken away. And the Mishnah continues, Nasan hakesef liYehoyariv v'asham liyadaya. These are talking about different mishmaros that are serving in the Beis HaMikdash. If the money is given to the mishmar of Yehoyariv, but the carbon, the animal, is given to the mishmar of Yedaya, so in such a situation, Yotza, he has fulfilled his obligation. However, if it's the other way around, he gives the asham liYehoyariv, first he gives the animal, the carbon asham, to the mishmar of Yehoyariv, v'chesev liyadaya, and then he gives the money to Yedaya, so then it depends. Kayim ha'asham, if the animal is still around, yakrivu b'nei Yedaya, so the people, the mishmar of Yedaya, they should bring the animal because they receive the money. V'imlo, and if not, yachzer v'yavi asham acher, he has to go and bring another carbon asham. Shahamevi gezelo ad shelo hevi ashamo yotza, because if somebody brings the, meaning returns. And the reason for this distinction is, Shamevi Gezelo Ad Shalohevi Ashamo Yotze, if somebody brings the money before he brings the animal, the carbon asham, he's Yotze. However, Hevi Ashamo Ad Shalohevi Gezelo, if the asham is brought first before he returns the principal, before he returns the money, Lo Yotze is not Yotze. And finally, the Mishnah says, Nasan es hakeren v'lo nasan es hachomesh, if he gives the principal but not the 1/5, ein hachomesh ma'akev, that 1/5 is not ma'akev, and he is still Yotze. And Rashi explains, if he's bringing up the money and he dies baderech, he dies on the road, so hakesef yinasin levanav, then the money goes to his children, it does not go to the Kohanim, meaning lebanav shel gazlan, it goes to the children of the gazlan, to hazacha beimi misa sager, because he was really zocha when the ger died. Ela deboy lemebet hashava, it's just there's a halach he has to do what's called a hashava, kiyechi de tahavale kapara, that way he can have an atonement ashvuasa and his false shvua. V'hashtasu leka kapara, kevin de mislay, but now that he's already died, there's no more kapara, so it goes to his children. And ha'asham yira, the carbon asham that grazes until it develops a mum, to have a asham shemesu ba'olav, it's called an asham, it's a carbon asham that its owners have died, v'kaim alon l'kamon, we've established later on, kol shebechatos mesa ba'asham roa, anytime you have an animal that's a carbon chatos that would die, so by carbon asham, in that situation we allow it to graze until it develops a mum. And then what do you do with the money? Linadava, that goes, linadava means l'shofaras, ketzam mizbeach, means to say you put it into the shofar, essentially the charity box, which is used in the summertime when they have to always have something on the mizbeach. They would bring olos basar lashem, they would bring carbon olos, ve'oros lakohanim, and then the oros, the hides, would go to the kohanim. And Rashi now explains what's going on with the Yehoyariv and the Yedaya. Mishmeres Yehoyariv Rishona. The Mishmeres Yehoyariv, that was actually the first one to serve. L'chola Mishmaros, that was the first one among all of the Mishmaros. Mishal Yedaya Achareh, Yedaya was right after Yehoyariv. And so therefore, Nasan HaGazlan es HaKesef li Yehoyariv, if the Gazlan gave the money to the Mishmar of Yehoyariv, b'mishmarto, again in his Mishmar, v'yachar kach Nasan Asham li Yedaya, and then after that, he gave the actual animal for the carbon Asham to Yedaya b'mishmarto in his Mishmar, so then Yotze, then he's Yotze, kin mefarash v'yazal, as the Mishnah will explain, shahamevi gezelo achalo hevi carbon Ashamo, if the person brings, is essentially returning what he stole, he does that before he brings the carbon Asham, Yotze, then he's Yotze, v'zeh zacha b'shalo, v'zeh b'shalo, and then each Mishmar takes what is there. But let's say he does it out of order, meaning to say that he gives the carbon asham first and then he gives the money. So then we say it depends. And kayim ha'asham, if that animal of the carbon asham is still around, yakrivu b'nei Yedaya, so then the people of Yedaya, that mishmar, they should bring the animal. Why? To consinu liYehoyariv. It's actually a fine against the mishmar of Yehoyariv. Lahachzir asham. They have to return the asham. Why? To shalo kedin avad b'nei Yehoyariv, because they didn't do the right thing. The mishmar of Yehoyariv, the kibul asham mekam mekesef, they essentially received and accepted the carbon asham before they got the money. Now, in terms of Yedaya, there's no reason to impose a fine on them to the mishmar to kabila, because they've accepted it in their mishmar. Rabbi Yehuda now Rabbi Yehuda will argue on the Bryce and the Gemara, but in the case of the Mishnah, he actually will admit. And finally, Rashi says, Nasan hakeren l'kohanim. Once the principle is given to the kohanim, in hachomesh ma'akev milahakrev eso asham. The fact that the chomesh was not given, that's not ma'akev. You could still bring the carbon asham. Im lo nasan adayin ulevasof nasan. Even if it wasn't given yet, it's given later on. It's still going to be okay. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Asham is Zekeren, when it says in the Pasuk Asham, it refers to the principal returning what was stolen. And Hamushav, when it says in the Pasuk Hamushav, Zechomish, that refers to the additional fifth. Awenu elo Asham Za'ayil, but maybe the word Asham in the Pasuk actually refers to the ram, to the carbon. Rashi says, Awenu elo Asham Za'ayil Asham, meaning to say the El Asham, the ram that's brought as the guilt offering. Umushav Zekeren, maybe the word Mushav doesn't refer to the Chomesh, but it refers to the Karen, it refers to the principal. And the Gemara continues, Ulamai nafka. Now, what difference does it make? Rashi explains, Ulamai nafkamina, meaning, either way, both are being mentioned. Tarvayu kamar kra, both are being mentioned by the pasuk. Tepuk le mina lafuka medarava. The real distinction is whether we say the word asham refers to Karen or whether we say the word asham refers to Ayel. The difference is to exclude what Rava said. The Amar da asham kirya rachmana la Karen, because Rava says the reason why the Torah calls the Karen the principle, they refer to it as the asham, because we learn out certain halachas. Uma asham eino babalayla. If the carbon asham doesn't come at night, just like the carbon asham can't be brought at night, dechsiv biyom tzavoso, like it says biyom, ve'eno balachatzon, you can't bring it halfway, half at a time. Af Karen, so too he applies those halachas to the principle, because the principle over here is referred to as the asham. That's what the Gemara says. Well, now what difference does it make if either way we're talking about both items? Who cares if the word asham means Karen or not? Lafuka midarava means to exclude Rava. Diyamar Rava, because Rava says, Gezel Hager, Shechziru Balayla, if you have the stolen item from the convert that's returned at night, Lo Yotze is not going to be Yotze, because again, it would be learned from the carbon asham. Hechziru Chatzoin Lo Yotze, if it returns it half at a time, not going to be Yotze. My time, what's the reason? Asham Kirya Rachmana, because the pasuk calls it asham, and therefore it has to be like the asham. And so therefore it wouldn't make a nafkamina if the word asham means Karen, and so therefore the Brisa says, Kishuomer Milvad El HaKippurim, when the pasuk says Milvad El HaKippurim, which is a reference to the carbon, Haveyomer Asham Zeker, and therefore it is clear that the Asham is in fact the principle, and therefore it is clear that we do follow Rava over here, that again it can't be returned at night, and it can't be returned Lechatzoyin. And Rashi explains, Kishuomer Milvad El HaKippurim Haveyomer Asham Dereisha Kernu. It's clear, since it says Milvad El HaKippurim, that the word Asham at the beginning of the pasuk is referring to the principle. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Yidach, we learned in another brisa, Asham Zeker, and again the word Asham in the pasuk refers to the principle. Hamushav Zechomish, when it says Hamushav, it refers to the additional fifth. Oeinu Elo Asham Zechomish, or maybe the word Asham actually refers to the additional fifth. And the Gemara says, Lamai Nafkamina, what difference does it make? Again, who cares if the word Asham refers to the Chomesh? Le'afukim Imasnisim, well, that would exclude what the Mishnah said. Tetanan, because we learned in our Mishnah, Nasan Lo Esakaren Velo Nasan Lo Esachomesh. If he gave him the principle, but he didn't give him the fifth, Ein HaChomesh Mi'akev, the fifth is not ma'akev. Adrab, on the contrary, chomesh ma'akev, then chomesh would be ma'akev if you're going to say the word asham refers to chomesh. But that's not the case. Kishu omer v'heshav es ashama barosho. When it says he returns the asham, v'chamishiso, and then it mentions the chomesh, haviomer, it's clear, asham zakeren, that the asham refers to the keren. And Rashi says, Oeinu Elo Asham Zechomesh, maybe Asham means the Chomesh, Umushav Zekaren, and the word Mushav refers to the principle. V'nafkamina, the difference would be, Lafukim Imas Nisan, are we trying to exclude from what our Mishnah said? To Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Eina Chomesh Me'akev, that the Chomesh is not Ma'akev. Nema Adarab, we could say the opposite, Chomesh Ma'akev, maybe the Chomesh is Ma'akev. To Asham Kirya Rachmana Lashon Carbon, because the Torah refers to that as the Asham. In the language of a carbon, Kishuamr, etc., when it says, Ashama Baroshu, and then says the word Chamishiso, it's clear that the word Asham refers to the Karen. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Yidach, we learned in another brisa, Asham Zekaren, when the pasuk says Asham, it refers to the principle. Hamushav Zechomesh, when it says Hamushav, that refers to the additional fifth. Uvegezel Hager Akasim Medaber, and the pasuk is talking about stealing from a ger, but it means to say Gezela not Geneva. Oeinu Ela Hamushav Zekefel, maybe the word Hamushav actually means Kefel. Uvegnevas Hager Akasim Medaber, and the pasuk is not talking about Gezela, it's talking about Geneva, and by Geneva, when it's done in secret, so to speak, so then you pay Kefel. And so the brisa says, Kishuomer v'heshav es hashama barosho v'chamishiso, when the pasuk says you pay the hashamo barosho and add a fifth. Harei v'maman hamishtalin barosh ha'kosim medaber. We see we're talking about maman hamishtalin barosh, which as Rashi says, mishtalin barosh means keren levado. You're paying only the keren. We're not talking about kefel shehu rosh. The keren is referred to as the rosh. That's the first payment that you need to be making back. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, referring to what we said above. Amar Rava said, Gezel Hager shechziru belayla lo yatsa. If a person returns Gezel Hager at night, he does not fulfill his obligation. And hechziru chatzoyin lo yatsa. Also, if he returns it in halves, he also does not fulfill his obligation. My time, what's the reason? Asham kirya rachmana. The pasuk calls it an asham, so it follows the halachas of the asham. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav, and Rav also says, Gezel Hager she'ein bo shava pruta l'chol kohen v'kohen. If you have Gezel Hager and it's not a pruta for each and every kohen, lo yatsi yedei chovah, so he does not fulfill his obligation. My time, what's the reason? Techsiv ha'asham hamushav, it says it has to be the asham that is returned, ad shi hashava l'chol kohen v'kohen. You have to have a real hashava, means a pruta, for every single kohen. Rashi explains, l'chol kohen v'kohen, for each kohen shebe mishmar. It means to say every single kohen who's serving in the mikdash at that time, because again, in this situation, you're not returning to the person you stole from. That person died, and there are no heirs. You're returning it to the kohanim in the mishmar. So each kohen in the mishmar has to get a shava pruto. Most of mishalood lahashlam will actually have to add on from his own money in order to make sure that everybody, all of the kohanim in the mishmar, get a pruta. It has to be an actual hashava to each kohen. And the Gemara says, boy, Rava asked the following question, Ein bo, let's say he doesn't have, as Rashi says, Ein bo shava pruta l'chol mishmar Yehoyariv. Let's say he doesn't have a shava pruta for the entire mishmar of Yehoyariv. However, v'yesh bo shava pruta l'chol mishmar Yedaya. But let's say it is a shava pruta, he does have enough money to pay for every single kohen in the mishmar of Yedaya. Shein mu'at, and that they have less people than Yehoyariv. Ma, what's the halacha? Boy, Rav, again, this is Rav's question, Ein bo l'mishmeres Yehoyariv, v'yesh bo, he doesn't have enough for the mishmar of Yehoyariv, but he does have enough for, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Yud Amid Beis.